Hey guys, I am excited that you are watching my video, and then that means you're going to do great on today's quiz. So today we're going to start talking about the Pythagorean theorem. Um, Pythagoras was a mathematician that lived a long time ago, and he made a discovery about what all right triangles have in common. So that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, so when you have a right triangle, that means that one corner is 90 degrees, a right angle. Obviously, you can't have a triangle with two right angles. So anytime you see that little box, that means that you are looking at a right triangle. So the Pythagorean theorem is associated with right triangles only right triangles. So those two sides that come together to form the 90-degree angle is called the legs. So in the Pythagorean theorem, we label the legs A and B. And then the side that's across from the right angle is always the longest side, and it's called the hypotenuse. All right, so the longest side, it's always across from the right angle, is called the hypotenuse. The relationship Pythagoras discovered is now called the Pythagorean theorem. And your parents would probably even remember Pythagorean theorem. They might even be able to tell you a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Hey, I remember that from school. So that's what we're going to use today. So the Pythagorean theorem is literally a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So A and B are always the legs of the right triangle. And it doesn't matter if you interchange A and B, but C must always be the hypotenuse. So this question says, what is the length of the hypotenuse? That means we're solving for C. Okay, so we're going to take these numbers, we're going to plug them into our formula and then do what it tells us to do. So A is 12, B is 16, and that's going to equal our hypotenuse squared. So now on our calculator, we're going to square 12, and we get 144. We're going to square 16. 16 squared is 256. And that's going to equal c squared. So 156 plus 144 is 400. So the hypotenuse squared is 400. So what is just c? Well, the only way to undo squaring a number is finding the square root of it. So when we find the square root of both sides, so the square root symbol and the little 2 cancel each other out. So that tells us c is equal to square root of 400 is 20. So in a right triangle, if the two legs are 12 and 16, that means the hypotenuse is absolutely going to be exactly 20. Okie dokie. All right, so let's try the second one here. So we're going to have A and B. So we're going to square both of those because that's what the theorem tells us to do, to square A, square B, and set that equal to c squared. So 5 squared is 25. 7 squared is 49, and that equals c squared. So 25 plus 49 is 74. 74 is equal to c squared. And now I want to know what is the square root of c. So I'm going to find the square root of both sides. Well, 74 is not a perfect square, so we can just leave the answer like this. That's not a perfect square. It's going to be an irrational number. And so when you have an irrational number, you can leave it as the square root of 74. Okie dokie. All right, you guys pause the video and I want you to try the third one. So here we have 6 squared plus 12 squared equals c squared. Well, 6 squared is 36. 12 squared is 144. That's going to be equal to c squared. So 144 plus 36 is 180 is equal to c squared. So what is, did I do that right? 36 plus 144. Yep, and that is a non-perfect square. So once again, when we find the square root of both sides, we're going to leave it in the form, the square root of 180, which is 13.416. So, and your calculator, go ahead and some of the problems you have to do today, you have to round to the nearest hundredths. So go ahead in your calculator, find the square root of 180, and we would round it to about 13.42 is really close to what C is. And the square root of 74 on the previous problem, it's about 8.60. Okay. And of course, the square root button, if you have the calculator I've been showing you guys in class, if you type this in and you hit enter, it's going to repeat this number. Make sure above the enter button, you hit the double arrows. Hit the double arrow button to get that as a decimal. Alrighty. Let me move on. Let me erase all of this. All right, so basically we have these three perfect squares here, right? This is a 3 by 3 square. So the area of this box is 9. Here we have a 4 by 4 square. The area of this box or this square is 14. And here we have a 5 by 5 square or box, and the area of this box is 25. So this is literally a picture of what the Pythagorean theorem tells us. So it's telling us that if you take the side length of this perfect square, which is 3, and you take the side length of this square, it's 4, and it's going to equal the length of this side, which is 5, right? Isn't that 5 units long? So it's telling us that 3 squared plus 4 squared is equal to 5 squared, and that's true. The square 3 squared is 9. 4 squared is 16. There's 16 little boxes in this perfect square. And that is equal to 9 plus 16 is 25. That is true. And Pythagorean figured out that if you take any perfect square like these, and if they fit together so that the corners touch, you will find a true statement like this over and over and over again. Only with perfect squares. And they always form in the middle of them. If you stick those corners together, it's going to create a right triangle. So that's what all that means. For any right triangle, the sum of the areas of the two small squares is equal to the area of the large square. All right, so if you're going to find a missing side, that says leg, but it's not always the leg. It's sometimes the hypotenuse. So how do I know if I'm missing A or B or C? Well, remember the two sides that come together to form the right angle are the legs, and across from the legs is the hypotenuse. So this side absolutely is C. So it doesn't matter if you use 3 for A or 4 for A, and either one of them for B, but you must leave C as the unknown. So we have A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So 3 squared is 9. 4 squared is 16. So 9 plus 16 is 25. So 25 is equal to C squared. And then we want C. We want the square root of C squared, which is just C. And we've already done this when we were just talking about this one. The square root of 25 is 5. So this is a 3, 4, 5 triangle. So a 3, 4, 5 units always will form a right triangle. All right, so let's look at the one at the top up here. All right, this time it tells us we have A. I know this is A because it's a leg, and we know C because it's the hypotenuse. It's the hypotenuse. It's across from the right angle. It's the longest side. And this time we're going to find what B is. So that means 5 is going to be A. B is missing. We know that C is 13. So we're plugging that into the Pythagorean theorem. 5 squared is 25. We don't know what B is. 13 squared is 169. And now we want to know what is B. our b squared at this point. So we want to get rid of this positive 29. So we're going to subtract, did I say 29? 25. We're going to subtract 25 from both sides. So we bring down our b squared because this is gone. So 169 minus 25 is equal to 144. And that's not what, we want to know what b is. This is what b squared is. So to find b, we got to take the square root of both sides. Square root of b squared is b, and the square root of 144 is 12. So when we found our missing leg, we know that this b is equal to 12. So this is a 5, 12, 13 right triangle. Okay. All right, so I want you guys to try these two at the bottom of the page. I want you to pause the video and solve it on your own, and then come watch the video and check your answers. All right, on the first one, we always start with the Pythagorean theorem. We're going to plug in what they give us. We don't know what a squared is. We know that b is 30. We're going to square it. We know that c is 34. So these are great big old numbers, right? So a squared plus 30 squared is what? 900. And 34 squared is 1,156. All right, we want a by itself, so we're going to subtract 900 from both sides. So a squared is equal to 256. And then finally, we're going to find the square root of a. And the square root of 256 is 16. Did you guys get 16? And remember, your C, your hypotenuse must always be the longest or the biggest number because it's the longest side. If you did this problem and you got this is like, I don't know, 40, hopefully you look at this and go, wait, that can't be right. C has to be the biggest number. All right, did you guys do the bottom one? So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So a is 20 plus 21 squared is equal to our hypotenuse squared. So we have 400 plus 21 squared is 441. 441 is equal to c squared. So then we have 841 is equal to c squared. And then we're going to find the square root of both sides. So the square root of 841 is exactly 29. So our hypotenuse is 29. Is that the longest side? It is the longest side. 29 is our hypotenuse. I hope you got those right, guys. All right, so let's look at these two. So the first one, pay attention to it because it says, what is the perimeter? The perimeter. How do you find the perimeter of a figure? You add all the sides together. Well, we only have two sides. This is a right triangle. So how do we know what the perimeter is? Well, the first thing we have to do is find our hypotenuse. That's what side we're missing, okay? So we're going to put 18 squared plus 24 squared, or if I wrote that backwards, that's okay. But I know my C is missing. So, you know what you could do in your calculator? You could bring up your radical and you could type exactly this under the radical. And then when you hit enter, it's going to give you the exact answer. If you understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so if you pull up the radical and do 18 squared plus 24 squared equals, it's going to go straight to the answer 30. Because it's finding the square root because you have the whole thing under the radical. If you didn't do it that way, you have 18 squared is 324 plus 24 squared is 576. 576. And when you add that together, you get 900, and then the square root of 900, of course, is 30. But you can do it this way. Just keep that in mind. All right, let's look at this one. Basically, we have two right angles sharing one leg. So we have this right angle, and then we have this right angle, and we have to find x. Well, we know the length of this whole bottom is 14. I need to know out of 14, how much is this one? How long is this side? And then how long is this side? So I can find the hypotenuse of this right triangle on the left side. Okay, so let's look, ignore all of this for a minute, all of this. Let's just think about this right triangle. So what's missing here? We have one leg. We don't know the length of the other leg. And we know the hypotenuse is 15. So the first thing we need to do is find out the length from C to D. So we're going to do 12 squared plus, we don't know what B is, or if I could put A, we don't know what A is, and B is 12 squared, either way. But we know 15 must be our hypotenuse. So 12 squared is 144 plus B squared is equal to 15 squared is 225. Alrighty, so now we're going to subtract 144 from both sides. So B squared is equal to 81, which means B, we find the square root, B is actually 9. All right, so if this section, so if this part is 9, oops, I'm using two different pens here. All right, ignore that. So this is 9. So if we know the whole thing is 14 and this part is 9, that means the length of this side is what? Let me get this off the board. Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry, guys. Erase everything, please. There we go. I'm using two different pens. All right, so this is 9. That means this is 5 because 5 plus 9 is 14. Okay, so now we're ignoring this one on this side. We're ignoring this side. Now we have a 5 by 12 by what triangle? Now we're missing the hypotenuse. So we're going to square 5. We're going to square 12. And that's going to tell us what our hypotenuse squared is. So 5 squared is, of course, you could put all of that under that radical if you want to on your calculator. You have to put the 12 squared under the radical. All right, so if you don't want to do it that way, you would do 25 plus 144 is equal to C squared. So 25 plus 144 is what? 169. And then you're going to find the square root of 169. And that would be 13. 13. You have to do all of that to figure out that X is equal to 13. 13. Okie dokie. All right, just one more thing I wanted to show you real quick. Let me get my screen cleared off. All right, so there are things called Pythagorean theorems. So just so you know, after you do a few of these, you might start recognizing this group of numbers, a 3, 4, 5. Those lengths will always make a right triangle. And then if you double these numbers, double each of them, a 6, 8, 10, those measurements will always give you a right triangle. If you triple those original numbers, 9, 12, and 15, so on and so forth. Now, that's not the only combination of Pythagorean triples, but that's definitely one that gets used over and over and over. Okay? All right, guys, thanks for watching my video. We will have class tomorrow, and I'll go back over a lot of these things, but hopefully this gives you enough information to do today's assignment. So you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys tomorrow.